going to cook up a nice marrow and chili jam today. This is actually a recipe that's been suggested by Teresa Whittam, or Witham. Sorry Teresa if I've actually said your last name incorrectly. And I tried this one last year, so I've purposely grown marrows and chilies this year so that I could do this recipe with all my own grown stuff. Now I'll be honest with you, last year, and I was talking to Teresa about this, it absolutely blew my head off. Now I figured out what I did wrong on this one. The actual recipe, if you have a look on the recipe files, says I think it's 100 grams of chilies. Now what I did is I used these, which are dried chilies. Now these have been dried from ones which were grown last year. I think what I actually did wrong is it should have been the fresh chili. So I've got my lovely fresh chili over here which have grown. So if I just pick that, momentous occasion, if I weigh that, then that one chili, it's about 25 grams in itself. Now if I actually put these 6 dry chilies in and weigh those, they actually weigh less. So I'm not going to use 100 grams of dried chilies because that is absolutely just going to slaughter me and I'll end up blowing my head off. And I'm actually going to dry that one so I can keep that one. And I've got about 6 more chilies grown, so I'm really pleased with my chili plants this year. It's the first time I've grown chili. Sort of kept on thinking it was like tomato plants and kept on taking off the little side shoots. That's when I realised that's actually where the chilies grow from, so I stopped doing that and I've actually ended up with some really nice chilies instead. So what I need for this is I need 1 kilogram of marrow. Now again, marrows, I am swimming in marrows, which is brilliant, but it means I've got so many other things to use, it's getting beyond a joke. So I've just chopped up one of the marrows that I have. After I've taken the skin off the ends and scooped all of the seeds out of the middle with a spoon, I've actually, for something which was over 1 kilogram, ended up about 16 ounces under where I need to be. So I've already cut that one up and cubed it, so I need another 8 ounces of marrow. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to chop up probably half of this marrow here. And obviously I'm going to need to peel this one and take the seeds out as well. Now some of these seeds in here are really nice seeds, so there's a possibility of actually having some of those stored for use for growing next year. Obviously it's not necessarily going to be guaranteed that they will end up growing, unlike the ones that you buy from the shops which have a certain success rate. When you're doing it for yourself, that's not a guarantee. It's also worth a try though, isn't it? So just scooped out the centre of my marrow and then I'm just going to peel the skin off. I don't want the skin in there, it's going to be too tough. And then just see if I'm actually going to have made up my shortfall to get up to one kilogram. As per the recipe. You could always just double your recipe so that you end up with more. So obviously if you end up with a massive glut of marrows and you have no idea what else you're going to do with them, then double the recipe. You just need to make sure that you've got enough jars to actually store it all. It is lovely. It is really, really nice. It's really nice with cheese. I'm a vegetarian, so I don't eat meat, but I understand that it's actually really, really nice with meats as well. Let's just cut that end naughty bit off. Right. Excellent. So that's actually what I needed. So let's just slice these up. I'm going to slice and dice, pop those in there. I'm really excited with this recipe this year because it also has onions in there, so I'm going to be putting and using some of my own grown onions. So everything that goes in here, except for the sugar, is actually from homegrown. So I've already sliced up my onions, and obviously being homegrown onions, very, very strong, and I did end up in absolute tears because they were just stinging my eyes so much. You notice I'm also wearing my glasses today. Now the reason for that is I do normally wear contact lenses, but I'm going to be handling chilies in a minute. The last thing I want to do once I've been handling chilies is then stick my fingers in my eyes to remove my contact lenses, because that is going to hurt. So just be careful if you're working with chilies. Obviously some people wear gloves, I've washed my hands, so I've got clean hands to start off with, but I don't like wearing gloves when I'm chopping, just simply because I'm always scared that I'm actually going to end up chopping the gloves and they'll end up in the recipe as well. So what I have so far is I have all of my marrows, and they're in my preserving pan, and then I have my chilies, and I'm going to go for these 6. As I said last year when I actually did this recipe, I did 100 grams of dried chilies and it blew my head off. And then on the subsequent batch that I made, I only used about 25 grams of fresh chilies, and then that just wasn't enough. So it is a case of just playing around with this recipe, playing around with the heat that you can take as well. I've never really been one for really hot dishes, although I like the spicy flavour. I don't necessarily like the spicy heat of it. Right, so they are nicely chopped. So what I'm going to do now is I've got this really lovely little cutting tool. Used for herbs, but actually it's going to work quite nicely with these chilies as well, she says, as they start sticking all over the place. It doesn't matter if I don't chop them up really finely, because I am actually going to get the food processor and blitz everything in a minute anyway. So there's some lovely seeds in there, chili seeds, and they are going to go into the mix as well. Right, so they're a little bit chopped up. This one's stuck in the middle there, let's just grab that out. And I will tidy up as I go along, I promise. Let's just scoot those out the way, because I want all those chili seeds in there. Pop all of those into the preserving pan. There we go. So, to start off with, I've got the marrow and I've got the chili already in the preserving pan. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to blitz those up. And after they've blitzed up and actually release a lot of the water that's in the marrow, I'm then going to add the other ingredients. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start blitzing these up. You can see lovely cubed marrow, and the chilies are in there as well, already slightly sliced, but I could do with a bit more squashing. So I'm just going to use a nice little handheld blender here. So watch out for the noise. Okay, I'm just going to do it in little bursts, otherwise it's going to fly everywhere. So you can see it's taken a bit of time, but what you can actually see is it's starting to go mushy, and you are actually starting to get some of that water coming out of the marrow. So once the sugar's mixed in, that'll actually dissolve really nicely. So let me just carry on with this. Not far off now. So see, a good idea to actually cube the marrow first. You try to do this with the whole marrow, it will take you absolutely ages. Smell the chilli. No, I'm getting absolutely covered in marrow. Never mind. Oh, that's a nice, really chunky bit of chilli in there. I'm not going to leave that like that. You can see, I don't think the camera's covered. It is very messy. Right. Okay, so that's all nicely mashed together. And again, if you have a look, so liquidy, there's so much water in that, and that is, as I say, going to work really well when we put the sugar in. Oh, well, I nearly forgot it, nearly forgot the onion. I don't actually want this to go in and remain whole, because it's not going to be sort of fried down. It is actually going to be a background flavour, so if I leave it in chunks, then it will actually still be in chunks within the jam itself, and I want it smooth. So I'm going to just blitz those onions in as well. Let's see if it goes everywhere again. Right, so now I've got everything blitzed up in there, it's time to add the other ingredients. So what I have here is 100 grams of sugar. I'm just using granulated sugar because I'm doing so many preserves at the moment. I've just bought a giant bag of sugar, 5 kilogram, because it actually works out a little bit cheaper in terms of the fact that I'm making jams, I'm making chutneys, I'm using the same sugar. Obviously, depending on the jam that you're making, the fruit jam that you're making, you might need to add in some additional pectin. Obviously, things like strawberry jam, you might use a jam sugar which has a pectin added in. If you're making strawberry jam using granulated sugar, you might need to add extra lemon or another pectin source of some kind. Right, so that's my 100 grams of sugar, and it's actually straight away just dissolved. It's just disappeared immediately. So that's the 100 grams. The next thing is vinegar. Now, it would normally be white wine vinegar, but I'll be honest, I haven't got any. So what I decided to try, because I have absolutely loads of this in the cupboard and it needs to be used up, I've got some balsamic vinegar. And I just thought, well, the flavour might actually work out quite nicely. So I'm going to put one of these funny tops on. Oh, that's going to take me ages. Oh no, that's not too bad actually. 100 millilitres of balsamic vinegar. It's going to give it a different colour. Last year when I used the white wine vinegar, obviously it had a nice light colour and you could see the chilli flakes and the little chilli seeds within the savoury jam itself. I'm not sure how this is going to work out, but I think the flavour might be quite nice. Let's just pour that in there and give it a stir. It's smelling quite nice. Obviously balsamic vinegar has a sweetness to it, so you might actually end up with sort of like a sweet and sour, spicy kind of marrow jam. It's always worth a little experimentation. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. If it doesn't, I've got an awful lot of marrows which I can still do some more with. Okay, so the next thing to do is to pop it onto the heat and bring it to the boil, and it shouldn't actually take too long. I'm just going to put it on full power and just give it a little stir. There's an awful lot of stuff around the edges where I blitzed it before, so just try and push that down. So I don't want it burning as it's actually doing its cooking. So just pop it down. I don't think there's any necessity to keep on stirring it while it's in there. We just have to leave it now. Okay, it's still going. Now, I did just have a little sneaky taste and I thought it tasted not sweet enough. So I've just had a look at the recipe again and I realised that I put in 100 grams and what I needed to put in was a kilogram of sugar. So I've upped it and it's looking a lot happier and a lot more jam-like, if I can get my words out. So if you're following the recipe just through the video, it is actually a kilogram of sugar. So it's the same weight of sugar to the vegetable or the fruit. So it's very much like most jams, you equal your sugar to whatever you're actually making the jam out of. Right, so this is really starting to thicken up now. As I'm actually putting the spatula through, it's dragging a little bit, which means we're not that far off. So what I've actually started to do is I've started to prepare some of my jars. So what I've done in the oven is I've created a little bain-marie. Now, because I've just used the smaller recipe rather than doubling it up, I don't think I'm going to need any more than sort of about 6 jars. So what I have here, if I just move the camera down a little bit, is I've actually got my 6 jars. They're in this tin, baking tin, and I've got a little bit of water in the bottom, and I've put the oven on to 100 degrees. It's a fan oven, and I'm going to keep them in there until I'm ready. They are actually getting quite warm. They need to be hot really, so that when I put the hot fluid into the jars it will be sterilised. So I'm just going to pop those back into the oven for a moment. Okay, and what I also have is I've put my lids into a bowl with boiling water. Now ideally if you're actually going to sell your products,
what you do absolutely have to do, and this is a legal requirement, is you have to have fresh new lids. You can also get the wax paper and the cellophane covering, which you might often quite see with the elastic bands around them. I'm not sure about the legalities of doing that if you're selling products, but certainly something that people do often when they're making jam, and that's quite easily available in most supermarkets. Because I'm actually going to be using these products for myself or my family, I am going to be using lids which came with the jars. As I say, it's not going to affect any legalities because I'm not selling this particular one, but if I were, then I would have to buy fresh new lids to do that.
Right, so I think we're nearly there, so I'm just going to grab a bit of this with a spoon, plop it on a plate. Let's have a look at the consistency of this. Yeah, I think that's actually ready. That's going to set really nicely. So, pop it back in. Let's have a little taste. Yeah, I'm quite pleased with that. The balsamic vinegar has actually worked really nicely. It's not too hot, although the heat's starting to come through a little bit now, but yeah, I'd say that's just right. So one more stir, and then I'm going to get those sterilising jars out of the oven and get them potted up. Lovely. Right, still feeling the heat of that in my mouth, but it's not unpleasant, it's not too harsh, so it's nice and something that you can handle. Okay, so let's just get all my bits and pieces. This is hot, it's just come out of the oven and it's got the sterilised jars in it, so let's just position that there. And let's pour the pan over here. Okay, let's give it one more stir and we're ready to actually go into jars. So, what I do have is I have my ladle here, and I also have my funnel. Now this funnel is exactly the right size that I need for my sterilised jars. I don't want to just pour it into the jars because if it goes around the rims then potentially you could actually end up with some mould and it's not very pleasant. So I'm going to do, without burning myself hopefully, is I'm just going to ladle into funnel and into my sterilised jars. So possibly, I think these are 8-ounce jars, so it might take 2 and a bit ladles per jars. This is where I see if I actually have put in enough jars for what I have. There we go. I'm not going to go right to the very top. It's actually quite high enough. And again, I'm just going to get one of my lids, which I've put in the boiling water, so you get asbestos fingers. I'm not sure it's quite going to do it when I lift this out. Ready? Hot. Okay, and just make sure it's sealed whilst it's actually still hot. And that's my first jar right there. Okay, it is a dark colour. I thought it was going to be the dark colour because I used the balsamic vinegar, but it tastes really nice. I think I was quite right with the idea of sweet and sour flavour. It's almost the flavour of like caramelised onion. So I'm quite pleased that I've adapted a recipe just based on what I had in the cupboard, and it has turned out really, really nicely as well. So there goes another one. Hot fingers. There we go, and you can actually see some of the little chilli seeds in there as well, which is really nice. So they're not sunk to the bottom, which means I'm going to get quite a nice set on that as well. It's nice and thick, and it is exactly what I wanted. It is a savoury jam. So all's left for me to do is finish filling up my jars, sealing them off, and by the looks of it I'm absolutely going to be spot on. Problem with these metal funnels is they do start to get hot. What I also have is I have this one, it's a plastic one, it's a thinner one, so if I have a bottle of them doing sauces, it's actually quite useful for that one. So I've got 2 different funnels, one which is a metal one which is quite big for jars, and then this one which is thin for sauces. So I'm going to finish doing these, and by the taste of what I've already had very, very nice potential for dipping sauces. So I'm looking forward to maybe making some spring rolls that I can use. But actually I think they go quite nicely with things like sausages, obviously vegetarian sausages, but meaty sausages if you do eat meat as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this, I hope it's been useful for you. So please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Facebook, join the group and add in some of your own recipes. And if you have anything that you'd like me to try to make, I'll do my best, and obviously if I have the produce from the allotment, I will give it a go. Okay, thanks very much. Take care.